Hello and welcome to a Christmas-themed and thinly staffed version of the Motor1.com Test Car Happy Hour. I am Seyth Miersma, and joining me today is Jeff Perez, Senior Editor of Motor1.com. Hello and happy holidays, Jeff.
Hey, happy holidays. Great to be here.
Yeah, we are. We're going as those of you who are veterans of the happy hour know, we are going a little bit early today. Everybody's going to get kicked out of the office, so to speak, a bit early so that we can start the Christmas holiday. And we wanted to make sure that we did one more podcast before we did. Unfortunately, Brett Evans, who is all queued up with some awesome things to talk about, and the Christmas spirit, is having some technical difficulties. His internet connection isn't working, so he may be weighing in with his phone with comments or giving us some stuff to talk about. But in the meantime, Jeff and I are going to sort of hold down our special topic today, which is, in the spirit of the holiday season and going to grandma's house, road trips and the cars that we love for driving road trips. Both new, a couple of new ones, and then some of our favorites of all time we thought would be a fun one to talk about. So
Yeah.
Hello to Major. Hello to Vampire Bear 13. Merry Christmas to you as well. Good to have you in from Ohio. As you guys can see there, if you have a question or a comment during the podcast, please let us know. Whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, you can join in and just leave a comment wherever you are, and we'll get it. We'll put it up on the screen. We'll answer any of the questions that you have. But Jeff, why don't you kick us off? Let's start with some of the modern ones. We were chatting about this a little bit yesterday and today. Like we're thinking through some of our favorite road trip, like new road trip cars that we've driven presumably in the last year or so.
Yeah. One of my annual, I guess, things that I do, especially for work, is I tend to drive up north, either for Amelia Island, for Daytona, because flying from South Florida to up North Florida doesn't make any sense. So I like to do the long drive. And one of my favorite cars I've done that in is the Genesis G80, which is just an amazing luxury car in every sense of the word. And it's easily my favorite road trip car, I think, of any of the ones I've driven up to North Florida. That's actually a picture from Amelia last year when I took it up there. It's just, it really is it's the E-Class competitor, right? The 5 Series competitor, mid-sizer, super, super comfy, great V6 engine. You can comfortably drive that car for 6-7 hours and have no problems with it.
Yeah, I just recently took a G80. I think it was around Thanksgiving. Took a G80 across the state of Michigan for a good. That's basically a 2.5 or 3 hour road trip, depending on what the kids do. And I echo all of that. Super comfortable, filled with amenities, nice stereo system if you're able to use it. If you don't have people chatting away in the background, and just a nice, great, comfortable, powerful highway cruising car. I love the Genesis for this pick.
Yeah, no, it's super comfy. And the seats, I mean, I think Genesis, we've driven the GV70, right? And GV80, and the G90 is a totally different level of comfort. But I think they make maybe some of the best seats right now, maybe some of the comfiest, highest quality leather seats. I love those seats so much. And they're super configurable, super comfortable. I don't remember if the G80 had massage. I know the G90 for sure does. But yeah, they're really comfy.
Yeah, my G80 did not, that I recall, but yeah, the G90 for sure does. But yeah, as you can see, a beautiful interior, everything you need. Really, so maybe this is worth discussing too. In your mind, what are the things that you're really looking? We've hit on a few of them already, right? A comfortable ride, comfortable interior and seats. What are some of the other things, maybe unexpected things, that you look for in your kind of ultimate road trip car?
Good hands-free driver assist for sure. So lane centering, adaptive cruise control. The G80 and I think all of the Hyundai Kia stuff has some of the best. The highway driving assist is some of the best out there, because especially in Florida, once you get to Central Florida and North Florida, it is just a straight line, and there tends to be traffic out of nowhere. So having that activated it makes it just so much easier. So that's a big one for me. Obviously, suspension and ride comfort. Like, I don't know. I've done the same drive from Amelia in a BMW M3, the current gen, and it was awful. That is, the ride quality on that car is terrible. So definitely need a good ride quality, and the G80 has that. And then, yeah, I mean, good tech is nice, like wireless CarPlay, good stereo system for podcasts or music or whatever. So those are kind of my three like main things that I'm looking for on a road trip car.
I think that like certainly wireless is always nice because you don't have to screw around with it a little bit more. But CarPlay, Android Auto, like being able your phone mirroring is pretty huge because giving you access to, especially over a long road trip, like everything that you might want to listen to, you can't just like throw on like the whatever mix you have or whatever podcast you're in the middle of or something like that. You want to be a little bit more prepared for it. So that's huge for me. And then maybe we can pivot to the car that I was supposed to take across the state tomorrow, but it's looking unlikely. As I hit some of my lists. But for me these days, again, two small children, both in car seats, like space is the number one thing that I look for in a road trip car these days. Like it's got to have a bare minimum. Your G80 probably hits the bare minimum in terms of the space that I absolutely have to get my 5'6" or my 6'5" frame and my wife and my children in the car, let alone all their stuff. But even better than that is the Toyota Sienna minivan that's sitting in my driveway right now. So the Sienna is actually
the Sienna.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't driven one in a really long time. This is the one that I have right now is all-wheel drive, which is fantastic because I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, but the weather throughout the entire upper Midwest is just completely insane right now. Really more than that, most of the country. So it's got all-wheel drive. This is the hybrid, right? So it's got the 2.5 cylinder, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder with the e-assist essentially. Really smooth. Sounds awful from the outside, but like once you're in the car with all the doors and windows shut and are moving along, it doesn't basically make any noise at all. It looks okay. I don't love the one that I have right now has got the sort of, it's a very like, in my mind, this is like a late 90s like dad spec minivan with the chrome wheels and like a pretty muted color palette. But man, it is super comfortable. It has all the space that I possibly need. In a way, I was thinking about this yesterday. It's kind of got I don't know if it's the platonic ideal of what a minivan should be in 2022, but I actually think that it's the type of vehicle right now that even somebody who hasn't had a new car in the last like 5 years might get into it and think like, this is exactly what I expect from a minivan, right? Like these are the seats that I expect. This is the kind of interior quality and feature set that I expect. Even the things where, the drop down central video display in a minivan is something that feels a little bit older, but it's existent in the Sienna. I think that you have to go get a car. Speaking
of.
It's
funny that we're talking minivans because there's a minivan waiting for me downstairs, and I can talk about that in a second. But I'm going to go run and grab that car, and I'll be back.
All right, sweet. So it's just Merry Christmas to me soloing on the podcast as Jeff goes to get his minivan. Let's hit a couple of these questions. First of all, Brett weighing in from the sidelines despite his internet troubles. Loves my necklace, as I'm sure you all do. Thank you very much to my lovely wife, Molly, for lending me this. It's amazing. And then, sorry, Kyle, I think you threw this one up already, but Brett said, the only thing I don't love about the Sienna is that the second row isn't removable. Otherwise, it's damn near perfect. And I would say, yeah, it's always nice to have the option of the second row being out. But if you throw up, Kyle, the photo that I took of the rear, so I have it now configured. This was me setting it up yesterday before we got any snow to get ready for the road trip that I probably won't take now, right? And you can see the third row folds flat into the floor. It's a little bit of a messy like load floor. These days, you sort of expect those things to be covered up a little bit so that you have more of a flat surface to slide things along. That being said, there's a tremendous amount of space between the backs of the second row and the tailgate. So if like me, I just need to put 4 people in it. And I think that's true of a lot of people, like even with minivans, like a lot of times the second row is the row that gets most often for kids. And the third row is sort of flex for lots of cargo or extra passengers when you have it. you can see like the minivan is perfect in terms of what we're talking about, like the Christmas road trip for me, because not only do I have space for the humans, but I have space for all of the obnoxiously large Christmas presents that my small children are more than likely to get, right? That's one thing that comes into play around the holidays that maybe people don't think about as much, and that you start to understand like as you live with your family for a little bit. It's not just you, it's not just your kids, it's not just their stuff and your stuff. It's also the stuff that you acquire when you go places, and especially when you're visiting grandparents. Certainly like over the holidays where you're getting a lot of gifts, having that space to be able to go home with more than what you came with is definitely an important thing. And I'm not sure if any of you out there have kids that have done this, but like, there's always the occasional. I'm not going to pull it out right now, but I have like a small ball pit that my mom got me with like hundreds of little plastic balls. And we've got this year from the other grandparents, we got a sort of an erector set to make like castle-like and cave-like structures. So we're talking about big things. So minivans come into play in a really important way when you have kids around the holidays, for sure. So Dominic says, speaking of minivans, and this is a little bit left field, is the Hyundai Staria ever coming to the US? The new Kona has similar styling details. I honestly don't know. I would have to go back and check out motor1.com to do a little bit of research to see whether or not we know anything about it. I can say, Dom, that I haven't seen or don't recall seeing any Staria spy shots this year. So I don't know if it is coming. It's not something that I think is like on the verge of being here. Now the interesting part is obviously, Kia has minivan. The minivan space is seems like it's expanding a little bit. Pacifica is still sort of soldiering along as one of kind of the standard bearers. Toyota still has Sienna. Honda still has Odyssey. But obviously GM and Ford have long since retreated from the space, and the Koreans are maybe coming up to fill that void a little bit too. So it wouldn't shock me if Hyundai was bringing one over as well, but I don't know to be sure. So thanks everybody for weighing in. Hey, Jonathan Brown, Merry Christmas to you as well. Thanks for saying hello and sticking with the podcast. Hey, JPP Info 509 says, good job. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's just me on my all by myself right now. And then yet again, our good friend Kevin Hawthorne is saying hello from Lakeland, Florida. Actually, from what I heard from Jeff and from a few of our other folks in Florida, it's pretty cold there too these days. So I hope it's I hope you guys are staying warm, even though you're maybe not facing the same single digit temperatures that we are. Jonathan Brown says, what is the rear opening size of the rear door? 48 by 48. I don't know. That's an awesome question. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. It's at least that for sure, but I would have to go back and check the spec panel. I not completely prepared with the Sienna aperture specs yet, but I can definitely grab the tape measure and brave the polar vortex in my driveway for about 10 minutes after we're done, and I will respond to that comment and get you that specification. But I can say that it's large. Not only is it large, but there's not a whole lot like blocking the side. Sometimes. Not just with vans, but with all, tailgates, SUVs and stuff like that, you can have bigger intrusions on the side that make it difficult to get wide items in there. Hey, Jeff is back, and now he has a minivan too.
Oh, I'm back, and I'm out of breath because I ran down there. But minivan, Chrysler Pacifica plug-in.
Yes. Which Pacifica do you have?
The fully loaded. It's the Pinnacle, the plug-in.
Ooh.
Let me see. Yeah, fully loaded. So
awesome.
Yeah, those are cool.
So that's been lots about the Sienna, lots about minivans. Why don't we move to Jeff? I know you have another modern car that you love, but we also were talking about some of our favorite of all time, like our classic at best road trip cars. By the way, before we start, I absolutely like Jonathan, Kevin, Brett, Dom, JPP, all you guys who are on there. Let us know, what is your favorite from your entire history of riding in a car or driving one? What is your favorite road trip car of all time? Jeff, you've got a great one teed up right on theme for us.
Yeah, so we'll keep the minivan theme going. So when I was younger, this was before, SUVs were a big thing. My mom had two minivans. She had a Ford Windstar, and then we eventually upgraded to a Honda Odyssey, 2003, 2002. Bought it brand new. Like that was our road trip car. We used to drive almost every summer up to Tennessee from South Florida. So that was like 16 hours, 12 hours, something like that. We would drive up to Pigeon Forge, and that was our summer vacation. So I spent a lot of time in the back of the Honda Odyssey, and it had the TV, which was great.
It's amazing.
But the problem is that with two other siblings, there's always an argument about what we're going to watch. And 90% of the time, it came down to two movies. It was either Free Willy, which my sister was the youngest and mostly got to pick the movie. But then me and my brother always wanted to watch Shrek because I think it was a year or two old at that point. So those were our go-to movies on road trips. But yeah,
it still blows my mind. I mean, I've leapfrogged now having, so when I was a kid, there was no TV in there wasn't even a minivan really. Like, I mean, it was, I guess the first minivans were in the US were like 1984, I believe is the year that the GM, God, what is the name of that platform? But the GM minivans start coming out. There's a Chevy Astro van and the GMC. What was the GMC? Safari. In any event, there were no TVs involved at all. So that helps to just delineate the age discrepancy that we're talking about here. But now I actually kind of was just thinking this the other day when I was, again, thinking about the road trip or picking up the kids even from daycare. It'd be nice to be able to, one, have a DVD, and two, have the process of putting a movie on just be as simple as putting a DVD into the DVD player in the minivan. Because if you're not all set up for it, and I'm not right now, like actually finding the adapter, the HDMI adapter that connects to your tablet, whatever that is, and then getting that hooked up, and then making sure that everything is up and running for the kids with the wireless headphones and things like that. No problem at all if the kids are probably about the age that you were when you were doing your road trip to Kentucky. But when they're 3, it's a lot more difficult. You have to have everything really prepared for them. So,
well, I mean, every kid now basically is a tablet, right? Like the in-car TV sort of died with the invention of I guess even the smartphone and the tablet. But like, yeah, those are, I mean, the funny thing too is like, I don't know, it was like this big, like a tiny little TV that came down from the top of the roof, and you could like barely see it from the third row. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was
just such a novelty that I can imagine being that age and being able to watch a movie while you're in the car, kind of just like blowing your mind as a kid. Or maybe a little bit later when you got to the stage where those TVs were then, they were baking in, some other kind of accessory cable so that you could hook up like a gaming system to them too. I've never actually done this before, but it's still kind of a dream of mine to do a road trip where I get to like sit in the back playing Xbox while somebody else drives me around. Great pick.
I was going to say, we did that, the Escalade, we did that one time for, we drove from Atlanta to Tennessee, and we hooked up the Nintendo Switch back there, and they were playing while I was driving, but that was cool.
Jeff, did you guys have your Odyssey long enough that you ever drove it? Like, or did you ever a chance to drive that generation of Odyssey?
No, I don't think so. I think they got rid of it before I was old enough to drive. But no, I've never driven that generation.
All right, we're gonna have to get an answer to why, but Brett says that if he were on the stream right now, he'd be fuming against the in-car DVD. I'm fascinated to know why.
I bet it's like an old man take where it's like, oh, you should be looking out the window, you should enjoy the road. And I'm sorry, Brett.
That's probably right.
Yeah.
We got a couple of favorite road trip cars here too. Jonathan Brown says that the C8 Corvette is his favorite road trip car, which is an excellent pick. Leave the wife and kid at home too. I would say that's probably correct. You can bring the wife along. Actually, the C8 has got plenty of storage space, I think. So unless you're not doing like a across the country thing where you might want to bring like a week plus worth of clothing, I think you could pack that thing pretty well too. So C8 would be an awesome pick. I also think that's I haven't done a long road trip in it, but it strikes me as being a car that's got a variable enough ride that you could do a long cruise and have it not be an issue.
Getting in and out is the issue with the C8, but once you're in it, then it's pretty comfy.
And then Vampire Bear says that their favorite road trip car from when I was young was my mom's 72 Plymouth station wagon, dark green with a matching vinyl interior. Love it. Yeah, we had my mom always had some kind of like early 70s car that she called her winter car. There was never a wagon. And I do winter car in quotes because it was always, of course, like a giant American rear wheel drive sedan that she just put like bags of sand or salt in the back for. And she drove it in the winter because she didn't want her good car to get rusty, like driving on salty Michigan roads in the wintertime. So yeah, I'm very familiar with that era. There's a Plymouth in there. There are a lot of Mopars actually. But the old station the old station wagon is kind of where my mind went to for the one of my all-time favorite road trip cars. So Jeff hasn't seen this yet, but and I didn't grab the right one. I should have grabbed a Eurosport, but one of my very favorite all-time road trip cars is a 80s, that like mid to early to mid 80s Chevy Celebrity station wagon. I don't know if you ever had the pleasure, Jeff, you're a little young, of riding in one of these guys. This is the Eurosport here, but one of my very best friends in the world, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Cohen, I went to high school with her, had one, and she and my friend John and I drove this thing all over the place. We went to concerts in it. We went from Western Michigan to Stratford, Ontario to see the Shakespeare Festival one time. We just did like my entire sort of last 2 years of high school. Yes, Brett had a celebrity too. My last couple of years of high school and my first couple of years of driving were all like very colored by this vehicle. So the celebrity wagon, I think that hers was an 87. I don't know. I actually should have done a little bit more research here because I'm not sure if they offered a lot of powertrains, but I know for sure that they had a 2.8 liter straight six, I think, making like 130 horsepower or something. That would just
look at that interior.
Unconscionable. Yeah, this is the car. So this actually, the photos that I found here were from a Craigslist listing that was posted on Jalopnik. So hat tip to Jalopnik for finding this car and letting me scrape your photos. But that was the interior. Tape deck, that 2-spoke steering wheel was amazing. Like very, very few frills. But, you know, we had, like a lot of kids back then, had a giant box full of like tapes, and we would make mixes for the road. The other great thing about this car, Kyle, if I put a photo in there, is the Celebrity wagon had an optional rear-facing jump seat. V6. Thank you, Jonathan. I honestly wasn't positive if it was a V6 or if it was a straight 6 in that one. So I appreciate the fact checking there. But the rear jump seats were amazing because they're just fun to have. Like if you're going on shorter trips, you could run back there and sit in that thing, or it was almost always just one of us sitting all the way across it. Or, you know, we would take it, we'd go camping places, and it was an awesome sort of camp seat too, right? You pull everything out, you pop the tailgate, you sit in this guy, like hang out by the campfire, you know, maybe drink a beer, an underage beer or something like that, and just have a fantastic time. So,
yeah.
So that Celebrity wagon in almost this exact color, that exact interior color, is one that just like, I have so many fond memories of doing tons and tons of miles in it. I'm sure I'd get in it now and just think it was a pile of absolute steaming crap to drive.
It looks good. I mean, I'm not super familiar with those, but I mean, all those station wagons from the 70s and 80s are like super cool to me. And I mean, like you said, I'm sure they were. Some of them were piles of crap, and you know, we have this weird nostalgia for them for some reason. But
well, the funny thing too is this is, you know, maybe this is kind of an area that only Subaru really plays in now. I guess Volkswagen too, or has until recently. But the small wagon, like the Celebrity, was a compact car, right? It was mostly sold. I'm sure they sold 90+% of them as sedans. But the small wagon is really a handy thing. I still think is. And then, especially for a kid, you know, like you want something that's cheap. Like it was old. Obviously it was used when she got it. It was probably 10 years old or more. Inexpensive to insure. Nobody really cared that much if it got beat up. But also it wasn't just a giant boat. It wasn't like the 72 Plymouth wagon we were talking about before, which is probably like, you know, a full 1,000 pounds and like 6 feet longer than this or something like that. But yeah, they were really reasonably priced and sized cars. And it's something that doesn't have a complete analog today, which I think is kind of neat, other than small SUVs. So,
yeah.
What is the Chevy celebrity wagon of today, of 2022? I wonder if there's an analog at all.
I don't know. I mean, the Volkswagen was close-ish, I guess, until they got rid of that, but I can't think of anything else really.
Yeah. Brett says, I have very little love for the celeb, even in retrospect. I like our bubble style 1996 Taurus wagon better.
Oh, wow. See, those I like. Those I have nostalgia for.
We had, those we have, I think most everybody in America must have some like relationship with a Ford Taurus of some kind, whether it's a wagon or not. But
my best friend in middle school, his grandma would drive us to school every day in her bubbly Taurus sedan. So that's my
That second gen car, I have a really hard time with. I like the first gen ones a lot. I think that they're pretty cool looking, and everybody that I knew had first gen ones, including wagons. My wife had a first gen wagon for a little while before I met her, and then a sedan afterwards. But I don't know if I could go there. I like the boxy look of the very late edge of the 80s over the like trailing edge of the 80s and leading edge of the 90s with jelly bean design.
Yeah.
Man, we got a lot of comments here that I've missed on. So Kinky Streets said, presumably talking about the Chevy, always like those wheels for some reason. We've got we read Brett about the celeb. Vampire Bear is saying that his name is Mark. Hello, Mark. He lives an hour north of Columbus, and it's minus 30 there with the wind chill. Insane temperatures all over the place right now. You said it's even chilly in South Florida, yeah?
Right now it's not. Right now it's 80 degrees, but this weekend it's going to be. This weekend is a cold front's coming through, so it'll be in the 40s, which is cold for us.
We've got 45 degrees Fahrenheit in Montreal. Hey, Kinky Streets, thanks for joining. Tell us what your all-time favorite road trip car is. And then so we're single digits. We're not in the negatives yet, unless things have changed dramatically. But we've been hovering around between like 5 and 10 degrees here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, all day. So and with the snow coming, that's why I keep saying my road trip may be curtailed. We were supposed to be leaving tomorrow morning, and we will see what actually happens. But all right, let's pivot back to modern ones. You've got one more modern road trip car, Jeff, that you.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a big like 3-row SUV, just something that you can fit a bunch of people in. And I was in Colorado a few months ago for my bachelor party, and we had a GLS on loan, and trying to get 7 dudes into that car, first of all, was a challenge. Not because of the car itself, just because people who don't, they're not super familiar with the technology of this car, like how you fold the seats down. So we're in the parking garage, like they're all trying to figure out how to fold the seats down while I'm, checking out or whatever.
Right.
But once we're settled, once we're in there, we got all our suitcases. It was like an hour drive to Colorado Springs. And I can't think of a lot of, maybe the Maybach version of this, but I can't think of a lot of like 3-row SUVs that are comfier just to drive on the highway over long distances. Like super smooth suspension. The sound deadening is awesome. The technology is really good. It's got all the, driver assistance stuff that you want and you need. And even in the snow, because it was actually snowing in, was it end of October there? Mm-hmm. It didn't even, it was awesome. I love the GLS. I think even though it's a little older than some of the other ones, the GLS to me is still sort of the top of the class in terms of luxury 3-rows.
Yeah, I think GLS has always been fantastic. I was a gigantic fan and recommended the last generation like all the time. The new one is completely killer and an upgrade in every way. I would say, like, to your point about, and I get it too. Sometimes it like takes a minute to figure out how you're putting seats up and down to get access to that third row. But that being said, this year, I think I've been through everything in the full size American SUV space, right? So Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer, Escalade, and the the GM versions of the Actually, I have not driven a Suburban this year, but I have driven the current Suburban. And then I've driven the Expedition, and I just recently got out of a Navigator Black Label. And I will say that like the long wheelbase versions of those cars are still, if you want to put like 7 adults in a car and have it be the access be easy. To me, those are still the way to go. Like even cars like the GLS, as nice as it is, you're going to be sacrificing quite a lot in terms of that third row legroom and headroom and stuff like that to put if you're doing like a guy's trip. Totally doable, but it feels more luxurious in the or the overall space feels more luxurious in the American versions of it.
Yeah, it's definitely tight. I mean, the thing too was the third row space, which the cargo space, which is not like on paper it's not that bad, right? It's actually better than like the X7 and the standard Escalade, I think. But still trying to get suitcases in there is tough, especially if you've got 3 people in the back row.
Yeah.
So it's a little tight, but I think once everybody was settled and we were on the road, it was okay. But yeah, to your point, a long wheelbase, Escalade or something is still probably the way to go for a bunch of people on a road trip.
We did I took an Escalade diesel on a road trip early, also in the fall, around the same time, I think, if my memory serves me correctly. And it was, again, my wife, my kids and I, and then my mother-in-law was also going. This is about a 3-hour road trip to northern Michigan, and we had just enough space. This was the standard wheelbase truck. We had just enough space with one seat folded down, and actually one of the kids in the third row to give an adult access to both of the kids at the same time, to get all of the stuff that we needed in there too. And that was, to be fair, that was a long trip. We packed a lot of like groceries. We had a cooler and things like that in it. So I do know that you can get it done in that, but the long wheelbase is really meaningful, and it's typically not a giant jump up in price just over like trim per trim either. So especially again for long road trips, I think that having that extra cargo space, a little extra legroom for folks is always really nice.
Yeah.
Sure. Dominic says he did about 7,000 miles of road tripping this fall in a Tesla Model 3 Performance. There's a lot to be said for autopilot. The Tesla supercharger network, and the stereo in the Model 3 is pretty decent as well. Also great seats in a further comment. Dom, that's a really great point. First of all, it was fun hearing about and following along a little bit on social media as you were doing that road trip. But we haven't mentioned, and we're not really talking about electric vehicles at all, right? And I think that is, you hit the nail on the head with the supercharger network. I think that one of the reasons why, I could do it across the state. Jeff, you could do it to Amelia, right? Like, or points even further north from where you are without too much of an issue. But in that classic, like, you've got a lot of other stuff to worry about on a road trip, in my mind, what you've packed, like everybody's sort of biology as you're moving down the road and things like that. Having to also factor in when and where I'm going to stop to charge up a big battery on even an extended range EV, I think to some people still feels really stressful, right? Yeah. So,
although I will say this, I really quickly, I drove a BMW iX M60 up to Orlando a few months ago, and all of the rest stops, Port St. Lucie and all the big rest stops here in Florida have charging stations. They have the Tesla supercharger on one side, and then they have the EVgo network level 3 on the other side. And at one point I pulled up and the line was insane. It was almost back out to the highway, but I noticed they were all Teslas. So I'm like, let me see if I can sneak around these. I sneak around. The Tesla superchargers are completely filled up. The line is ridiculous. There is nobody on the EVgo network. So I pulled in, charged, and had no issues. So, yeah,
I can totally see that, and I'm sure it depends on like where in the country you are and what time you're driving and all that stuff too. Dom says the CCS networks haven't reached the kind of reliability that I'd want to often rely on them, which I think is probably totally fair.
Sure.
Dom, you should also, whether you have it right now or in a second, you should throw up a photo from your road trip, because I know that you, like I said, you shared some cool ones on social media that we could take a look at. But I think that like we are there in terms of it being possible. Like I said, especially if you're, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Dom was doing the road trip on his own too. And I think if it were just me, that changes things a little bit. We're laughing. Jonathan Brown said that his favorite road trip car is a C8 Corvette. If you're doing something on your own, your personal preferences for just what you want to drive you have a lot more flexibility, right? Because you don't have to do the same kind of planning and the same sort of work in the car. So I would love to road trip an EV to see what it's like. And because I actually think that EVs do a lot of things really well that are amazing on road trips. Like they're very quiet. Again, like they provide an excellent soundstage for your podcast if you want to listen to that. Like they tend to be very tech heavy and have a ton of amenities and be really comfortable and smooth and all of this stuff. It's just about mental bandwidth for stopping and charging when you need to while you're doing or getting wherever you want to go. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would say that probably technology is solving some of that too, with baked in stops in navigation and just being able to do all the pre-planning. So awesome. All right. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining, and to everybody who really actively was commenting and asking questions. We really appreciate it. Maybe we'll have to do more. We talked about some other ideas for road trips too, so maybe we'll do some other live road trip type podcast and or more happy hours around this topic. If you guys are seeing this after the fact, as ever, we would love to have your questions and comments on YouTube with the recorded video, or leave them wherever you're watching. We'll try and get back and answer them, as I will with Jonathan about the size, the height and width of the Toyota Sienna's tailgate aperture. In the meantime, you can come back. We won't be here next Friday. I think we're going to take a little bit of a break from the Friday happy hours for the holidays, and then we're going to come back in the new year, re-racked and sort of ready to go with a whole lot more podcast fun. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody out there who's watching. Thanks again for joining, and thanks again for following us this year. We expect to do this bigger and better next year, and bring you all along with us. So Merry Christmas, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everybody.
All right.